Welcome to the Future of Work podcast with allwork.space. I'm Jo Mernier, and today I'm looking forward to speaking with Carolyn Cirillo, Workplace Research Manager at Knoll, who is here to talk to us today about the next generation of workers, which is Generation Z, or Generation Z for my American friends and colleagues. First, a little bit about Carolyn. She's a familiar name here at allwork.space, as she's a contributing writer, focusing mainly on workplace design, the future of work, technology, and flexible workplace trends, among other topics. At Knoll, Carolyn studies the design and interiors marketplace and conducts research to inform the planning of environments that drive creativity, innovation, and value. Prior to joining Knoll, she worked as an independent researcher, strategist, and content creator for brands in the built environment. And there's plenty more we could say here about you, Carolyn. You have a really impressive bio, but I've got loads of questions to throw.
Yeah, let's jump in.
We're on the clock, so let's jump in. So welcome to the podcast, and
thank you for having me. I'm excited to share our findings and some things we've been studying.
Fantastic. Well, on that, reading your bio, you're all about the research, and some of the studies you've done touch on the changing nature of work, digital transformation, technologies, and of course the future of work.
Right.
And a big part of that is the people. So
absolutely.
You've led a couple of major studies recently on Generation Z, which is facing Generation Z, your new and future colleagues, and a second study which you're about to release called Welcome to the Workplace. So could you give us an overview of this demographic, their key characteristics, and what they expect from the workplace?
Yeah, thanks, Jo. Sure. So for a couple decades now, the workplace has been focused on millennials. Everybody wants to, what do we need to do to attract millennials? But the millennials are turning 40. They have kids. They're often moving to the suburbs. They're certainly still in the workforce, but really the newest generation coming in is generation. We call it Z, but you're right, it's Z in the UK. And those we're classifying as born from about 1995 to 2010. So that would be kids who are mostly in middle school, high school, college, and then they're just entering the workplace. So the oldest ones, they're around 25-ish or so. So they're just in the workplace. We don't have a whole lot of research on them, but we're starting to watch them. And in some ways they're similar to all of us or any young person starting out. And they do have some similarities with millennials, but they're also very different in many ways. I would say one would be their financial outlook. I mean, the millennials accrued more student debt than I think any generation in history. Gen Z is going into they're much more savvy financially for whatever reason. They came of age in the 2008 financial crisis. Maybe their parent lost their job. Their parents tend to be like two generations above. That would be like Gen X generally. So they're much more cautious about about getting a job. They want to get a job. They want to get healthcare benefits and all those things. But they're also very entrepreneurial. And one of the most important things about them that differentiates that they are the most diverse generation in history. They are less. Almost half identify as non-white. They're very open about their gender identification. They're very tolerant of all these things. They're just used to being in a very diverse crowd, and that includes neurodiversity too. It's in learning abilities. It's not just what color they are, what religion they are, but some of these kids grew up with here in the U.S. we call them IEPs, individual education program. Maybe they had some kind of learning disability, and but sometimes those people are like their own superpower. Those could be people on the spectrum, and they might have issues with socialization or some difficulties for that, but that doesn't mean that they're not a total crackerjack programmer or something else like that. And then this whole remote work experiment that we've had with the pandemic has been good for a lot of people who have some of those characteristics.
Okay, and what you were talking about the diversity just now, and this is so important. And obviously, from my perspective, I think this could bring some really positive change to the future of work.
Yeah. They just have that expectation because their classmates are different colors. They're just really diverse. And they're just more tolerant of that, and they just expect that in the workplace. And we speak of it. They expect their workplace to look like their schools and their neighborhood, not all white. And they just think that makes for a better a better environment and more points of view. They really see the pluses of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the workplace and what they expect from the workplace, technology is a huge part of what they've grown up with. I mean, they've never known life without Wi-Fi or smartphones.
Right.
So what do they expect from the workplace in terms of the tech and the tools that they'll be using?
Well, they do. They're very into like the latest and greatest. They're very adept at these things. I mean, we all look up things on Google, but it's just like the only way that they think to look at things. And they're also a little less used to some things that we're more comfortable with. Like email is just they're just more texting. So a lot of times, from the employer's point of view, you might have to go through some sort of etiquette kind of training. But they also bring so many skills in technology and in social media. They know how to change minds. They know how to reach a lot of people very quickly with social media. And one of the things that they really bring to the workplace is what we're calling reverse mentoring. So it's not uncommon, and a lot of the larger companies have these programs where they'll pair a senior person with a younger person. And so the younger person, and which they like. I mean, they're very connected by technology, but they love the human connection too. They really straddle both worlds, digital and physical, just like the workplace is now. But they also, some of these companies are rolling out these reverse mentoring programs. And so the young people are sharing not just their technology savvy, but their point of view again about things like Black Lives Matter or gender, identity and things like that, and or just like what social media cues are. So they're happy to share that with their elders in the workplace. And I think it's really a two-way street. They can both benefit.
And when going back to what you said a moment ago about this generation being very keen to always Google and always be on social media and always reach for a gadget to get their answers, there is a downside to that, isn't there? Where they perhaps don't visit the library as often as they should, or am I generalizing here?
Right. Well, no, they want, again, they like to connect in person, but they also need these like retreat areas in the workspace, like everybody does. And we're seeing this happen as the workplace is changing. And so they like their quiet areas. And we're suggesting to some companies that they think about these totally unplugged rooms so that people can go in there, maybe it's to get away from technology, maybe it's just to debrief if they had, an intense meeting or something like that. So that's something that's very, it's something that they should really consider adding to the workplace. We just did a panel. We had some kids were still in college and some were early in the workplace, and they were saying like, oh yeah, well we've grown up doing our homework on our bed with our laptop laying down, so we act that way in the workplace. They like having sofas to stretch out on. And this one young woman, she was talking about how she it was only the very youngest people at her company who were using these rooms that were designed for things like that. Like the older people, they were built and nobody used them. And she went in there. I don't know if they had beanbag chairs, but they had just really loungy kind of furniture, and she was totally at home with that. And then once she and some of her peers started using it, then the older people started using those spaces, because everybody needs to have a little variety in their workspace. We don't all sit at a desk all day long anymore.
So they're really going to be influencing the future of design in the workplace.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in terms of flexibility, because that's such a huge part of the future of work, how important is that to Generation Z compared to more traditional perks such as salary and job titles?
They're interested in all of those. I mean, because of their financial conservativeness, like their salary is really one of the top criteria for them. And they want the salary and they want the benefits, but they do also want the flexibility. And they like the idea of working from home, some of the time. They like being able to, have a little flexible schedule. Because even before the pandemic, a lot of colleges were having hybrid learning. So they were already probably doing their lecture classes on video whenever they felt like doing it, midnight or 6 a.m. or 2 a.m. or whatever, and then live for their seminar. So they're comfortable with that mix. But they want to be able to come into the office sometime. In fact, they and the youngest millennials are having the hardest time with the remote work, because they just need that in-person connection. They need that onboarding. So there needs to really be some sort of a mix for them with the flexibility. But they just exemplify this gig economy, and they don't really visualize themselves working for one company anytime soon. They could have a job every couple of years, and that to them is the norm. And they probably have a side hustle also, and they might have had one in high school. I mean, these kids are making money, and they're not afraid to try new things.
Actually, that brings me to some points from your research that I just thought was absolutely incredible. They're very mobile.
Yes.
Study suggests that they're predicted to work 18 jobs, have 6 careers, and live in 15 homes in their lifetime. And
Mhm.
they may also switch jobs about every 2.5 years and switch careers every 7.5 years, which is
Yeah.
just amazing. So one of the things that struck me is that employers are going to have a really tough time hanging on to that talent.
Mhm.
So what do you think employers should do to attract and retain Gen Z talent?
Well, I mean, the physical workplace is one. And again, I only learned this the other day when we did our panel is we know that most people look on Glassdoor and the equivalent when they're looking for research on the company that they're interviewing with. But Gen Z, they'll go further and they'll go to Google Images or Google Maps, and they'll go and they'll look for the images of where they're going to work. And they want to see, oh, is this a place I'm going to be comfortable at? And they have such a focus on the environment and sustainability. That's probably something else that differentiates them. I think climate change is really their cause, even though there's a lot of people mobilized to address that. But they want to work for a company that walks the walk. And then we had somebody speaking to us, and they worked for a solar company. And they said, well, yeah, it was kind of cool that they used the solar extra panels and they made those into desks, but then they also took helicopters for other meetings, and they used all this like really wasteful transportation, and to them that wasn't really walking the walk. So it just the being really authentic is important to them. There's a lot of programs that employers can do, and we talk about this in the second paper that's coming out about letting them experience your workplace. So not just as when they're in college, but like you can have a different kind of programs and open houses in high school. They're super entrepreneurial, but that doesn't mean that they all want to start their own companies. Sometimes they just need a project or something in-house. So we're calling that entrepreneurship. And there's ad agencies who run like their own kind of Shark Tank competitions. I mean, that really resonates with them because they like the idea of having these resources, but really trying different things. And they also want to make a difference. If they would look at a company that has a volunteer program or, something like the Google Moonshot, where they devote X time per month or per week to do their own projects. So they really want, there's a lot of things that the companies can do both in the physical workplace and in their programs and policies.
Mm-hmm. And with this entrepreneurial streak, from the business perspective, do you think that having all these new people coming into the workforce who's got that seed, that kind of startup seed, and are they going to perhaps weight the workforce in the favor of contractors and flexible workers rather than the traditional permanent employees? Do you think we might see more of that in the future?
I mean, I've seen numbers on both sides of that, we're going to the gig economy and there's very few people going to have full-time jobs. And then I've also heard contradicting evidence. And again, they really want some stability. So I don't necessarily see that. I think that they will probably, emerge, especially when they're early on. Maybe when they're a little bit older, they might want to, jump around a little bit more. But I think that they have a lot to learn still. So I think they would commit themselves to a company for, initially, and then maybe be a little more mobile after that. And, but I think they do accept that they're totally aware of the other options to do things by the gig, and whether it's a side gig or their own, they know that that's an option.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that will switch. I don't really know if that will switch the whole workplace.
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I guess so. I'll give it another 10 years or so.
Yeah. And one thing you mentioned earlier was the environment, and that this generation has got quite major concerns for the environment. So how does that tie in with the built environment? As they age into the workforce, do you think they're going to be having some quite big influence on how we build properties and do the fit out?
I think so. I think they're aware of these things, and it's pretty easy to find out information on that. And I think that makes them more, like, you look at the co-working spaces and some companies where adaptive reuse. I mean, that's something that would really resonate with them because it's taking, they know, I mean, if they have any awareness that they know that building a new building is one of the biggest contributors to waste and so on. So I I just think you can signal that in your workplace. You can use like reuse some items sometimes, like some of these historical, like they've taken, like say if a warehouse was converted and maybe they took one of the mill wheels and made that into a table or a display, just to make, they love that. They're making the connection to what its original life was, because they really like this idea of this kind of cradle to cradle and renewable things. So I think they bring a strong influence there, and depending on how the job market goes, and if it's up to the employee, and there is a lot of employee empowerment now, if it's a choice between two companies, they're going to pick the one that's a little more sustainable, or that has a more sustainable profile. And again, it's very easy to find out, like, here at Knoll, we all of our wood is FFC certified, and there's a whole sustainability report. All this stuff is public access. So they can, once they get further down in the interviewing thing, and they can say, oh, well, I'd much rather work with them. They don't contribute to, the bad dyes in the water or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. And moving on to design, one of your other studies that you've done at Knoll recently is the Thriving Workplace, which is coming out very soon.
Yeah.
And obviously the pandemic has accelerated a lot of trends in the world of workplace design. And one of them is a shift to hybrid spaces and more hybrid and more flexible ways of working. And some companies are now planning for bigger and more spacious workplaces, but also that can foster collaboration, ready for a time when we can get together safely again, of course. So at Knoll, can you tell us about some of the design trends you're seeing at the moment?
Yeah, that's definitely one thing we did. We've been doing a series of roundtables for a year now, since the end of last March. We started bringing our clients together so they could kind of share what was going on. We've done a series of K-Talks at least once a month since then. We bring in different experts on all different topics. And then we did a survey of about 80 workplace leaders in December to find out, what are you doing? What's your workplace going to look like? And by and large, we found one big trend is most people are planning their office for collaboration. Because remote work for a lot of people is working fine from home, and they don't think they need to come into the office to do the heads down work. That's not necessarily true for everybody, and especially like for younger people, maybe they're still living at home and they have siblings and dogs and parents around, or even if they have their own apartment, maybe they have roommates, so they have to work out of their bedroom for a while. So they're happy to come into the office and they want the socialization aspect. But companies are designing for this collaboration, for the mentoring, for the onboarding, things that are really hard to duplicate with virtually. And so you can look at a couple other industries for analogies, like retail. Like, you can order so much online. Why would you go into a store? Well, you go for the experience. So stores are creating that experience. And then similarly in movie theaters, like, okay, we can stream whatever we want. Why would you go to the theater? Well, a few years ago, they started putting in, lounging, seats that you can lay down on, and cup holders and waiter service. They just made it a much more elegant experience. We're going to see that in the workplace as well. Just a lot of hospitality-driven spaces, big open spaces, and a lot of different choices. The Gen Z, they love being able to move around, like all of us do, from a desk to a sofa to a collaboration area. They like all the amenities and the food. In fact, one of our clients said, a lot of people, we expect a lot of people to work 2 or 3 days at home, 2 or 3 days in the office, and Friday, whatever reason, their company is going to be kind of quiet. So they were going to do free food Fridays to bring people in for that.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm down for that. That was one thing that kind of has gone away in the pandemic. So I think we're all excited to have that. And then another big trend we saw is because of the managing the space, and there's still a little bit of unknown of who's going to be in the office. So companies are looking for different technology of sensors and ways to track that and to reserve just whether it's a workspace and or the meeting space, and monitoring those. And we think there's going to be a lot more unassigned spaces. Our clients have said, especially the bigger companies, they're going to move to much fewer assigned, because they don't expect the same people to be in all the time. And then a lot of unassigned. So you're just going to, have a hoteling kind of area or something like that. And then you'll have a locker or that. And then we're predicting a lot of a neighborhood kind of approach. So like maybe there is a drop-in neighborhood, and then maybe there's a retreat, the kind of the sanctuary, the restoration, like the downtime. There's some for the heads down space. And then there's different meeting areas. So different neighborhoods, and then maybe you're one department. Maybe you don't have a desk, but the marketing department is always in this one area, or the finance department. Maybe the HR needs a few more enclosed meeting rooms, so that they'll have those in that areas, and just a lot of mobility with things on wheels and flexibility, things that we've been seeing, for a while, but just like with a lot of more materiality to just make it cozier and homier and quieter. Like acoustics are still a continuing issue. So there's different more decorative. We have a lot of like felt products that can be used, and like being, because there's still going to be a lot of openness, but there's going to be different. We have a part of Rockwell Creative Wall that you could kind of make like open ceiling to keep the ventilation going, so you can create a barrier of space but still let the air flow. So a lot of things like that. So a lot of flexibility.
And has the pandemic influenced a lot of these changes, or are these trends that have been bubbling away for a long time?
Yeah, a lot of like a little bit of both. I would say we've kind of been talking. We've had open offices for a while, and this is just sort of another adjustment. I mean, it's just a little less dense. We were moving to the densification for a while, so now I think. We're going to try that. I mean, at first, when the pandemic first happened, it was all about the screens and the plastic and less dividers. And then I think there's people are still looking at that. I mean, we've had clients say, oh God, it's taken us 10 years to change our culture. And in 10 months, we're going back to the high walls and all that. Because for a lot of people, the openness and the collaboration really drove their innovation. They really liked that. So it's people are just really, we're all learning as we go, and they found people could work at home. They found their programmers could work from home. The call centers are working from home pretty successfully, but there's still other segments who want to be in the office, and a lot of companies really want to get their people back in. So it's accelerated a lot of trends that we had.
Mm-hmm. And for those that do stay remote, and there'll be a mix of people in the office and perhaps working remotely at any one time. So I imagine the layout and the technology will have to adapt for both, won't they?
Right. So we're looking at a lot of different. We put together a whole meeting guide to address that, because it's everything from, there's new kinds of cameras now. There's these horizontal cameras, so you can get like a 180 view. There's ones for 360, so you can. We've been testing that one, because that's not a great user experience really. It's great when we all have our own square on Zoom, but once you have 2 or 4 or 10 people in a meeting room and people remotely, it's really hard to see them. So there's cameras that do that. There's tables. We're doing some tables that are sort of a V shape, so you can see you're not out of scale when you're looking at the camera that way. But we've seen this whole move toward more focus on the human experience, more on the person, and more equity, because we were all equitable when we all have our little square. And then it used to be uneven. It used to be the person who was calling in was like, you couldn't hear them as well. There were side conversations going on. So now there's this expectation for equity in the workplace too. And so we're seeing that with, like, say, a round table. There's no head of the table, or a square table where everybody has a side.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that.
And from the past year, are there any sort of good design outcomes that have come out of it? For example, one of the things that the pandemic highlighted was the need for healthier buildings, better ventilation, perhaps more natural light, that sort of thing, which ultimately supports both the physical and mental health of the people in the building.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is something that we can't discount on Gen Z, like the whole wellness thing with them. They are just from their upbringing, they're just more likely to have had mental health issues. And more importantly, they're not embarrassed about it. To them, there's really no stigma attached. And so they're very open about asking for, a wellness center. Like, that's something that they would like. I mean, not just a gym, but again, a quiet space or a yoga space, or, a download one. So I think, yes, those are definitely like, and the natural light, I think that's been, even law firms now are reimagining their spaces, so they can not just have the partners have the corner office that they're not even in all the time, but they're putting meeting areas there so that everybody can use them. So there's just this really big push for equity.
I think this generation is a breath of fresh air. I really do.
They really are. They're really good citizens. It's and they'll call you out. Both my kids are Gen Z, so I say I've been studying this segment for 21 years now. My personal petri dish. But yeah, I think somebody also told me that they're Z because they want to finish a problem. They don't, like, all generations have had problems. We've all been, whether it's a climate or environmental, this is not the first time that's heard of it, but they want to solve it. And they feel they can. And and again, they know how to mobilize each other. They know how to get information. They're not afraid. So I think they are going to really make some big impact.
Make some noise.
The workplace.
Sort us all out.
Sorry?
They're going to sort us all out, aren't they?
I think so. They have an impact in the workplace and in the world. They really are. They're fresh air. And we also didn't talk about, they're just so giving. We identified these 5 Gs, which I kind of touched on, gender, and then gigs, this whole gig economy, gaming. They're big gamers, and they compete in that, and they've also learned from that. The green aspect, but there's also giving. And even though they're not in their prime earning years, they still give money. We interviewed more than close to 70 young people last year. Almost every single one had multiple volunteer things. I mean, not even for school credit. They volunteered at a camp for disabled kids. She styled hair for people. They had little shops, and they donated the proceeds. They made Etsy soaps. They did tutoring and all sorts of things. They just have this giving nature, and they really want to make the world a better place, and they feel that they can.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, they really are going to help out the workplace and make some positive change.
Yeah. We keep encouraging the employers, like, you really need to listen to each other. It's really, I just think this whole two-way mentoring is good for both sides. They can really kind of keep a pulse on what, the new generation, what's of concern to them. And then they also, they're not perfect, and they have, etiquette and just basic, business things that they have to learn. We have to tell them that you can't communicate by texting, or you can't use your texting abbreviations when you're sending an email or something. So they need to model the behavior. So we just have to make it easy for them to do that. Just have access to mentors, have open spaces, so make things approachable. People not be in their enclosed office, but glass walls or casual gathering areas, so you can have that really serendipitous exchange, because that's what we're all missing. And so much happens there, from innovation for sure, but also socialization and just meeting people outside of their department. Because when you're new in a company, you want to meet a lot of the new people, and you want to learn about other opportunities. Like, they're very curious about what other opportunities, like, what can their career path be? This is all new to them, so they kind of need to be guided toward that. Yeah.
Well, when restrictions allow, then hopefully they can get together more with the other generations and like you say, share knowledge, gain some mentoring. I
mean, that's just how they've worked. Because most of them have been collaborating since grade school. They don't have, well, now they do, but before the pandemic, they didn't have desks around. If they did, they group them together in tables, or they work in round tables, and almost everything was a group project. That's just very normal for them. So they're very accustomed to being part of the team and all that. I mean, they like getting their individual credit. They don't necessarily like to be, that sort of bothers them sometimes if the whole team gets credit for one. So they like getting their individual accolades, but they're very much a part of the team, and they don't want to be shunned away and have to do their work. That's why this remote work has been tough for them. They like to be able to just sit across the table and like, okay, what's going on with this and that. So they're very accustomed to that.
Yeah. So co-working and flexible spaces will be perfect.
Yeah. They think that's the coolest things. They probably look at the Googles and the co-working, like, that's the kind of space that they want, that appeals to them. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, there is so much more in the report that we could talk about. So for our listeners who want to learn a bit more about the next generation, how they might influence the workplace, and what they can bring to the workplace, can you tell us where that we can find out more?
Sure. Almost all of our research is available on our website, knoll.com. We have the Embracing Gen Z, which is the paper about the 5 Gs that I talked about. And then probably sometime in the second quarter, we'll be coming out with the Gen Z at Work. And this Thriving Workplace is just being published now. That it's on our website. We're actually doing an introduction March 9th, if they hear this in time, where they're going to take them through all the different planning ideas and some of the research behind that. But it's all there. We also, we're on all the social media pretty much. I have not seen TikTok, but I know we have Instagram and Facebook. And on our YouTube channel. There's a video we did with Gen Z. It's also on our website, but you can look at the Knoll YouTube channel, and it's about 5 or 6 minutes, and you can hear in their own voices a video we did with some of these young people on what drives them. So I recommend you take a look at that. And then people can always reach out to me. I'm easier to find on LinkedIn. I'm Carolyn Cirillo with a C. And I'm happy to connect with people. But yeah, almost everything is there. It's all available, free download. You don't even have to give your email address. It's all there. But if you want to hear more about the Thriving Workplace, tune in on March 9th. And all of these, we've been doing the series of K-Talks. Those are all those replays are up. We did one on the Gen Z. That's live on, it's not live, it's on the website as well.
Thank you very much, Carolyn, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we hope to have you back on again sometime.
I would love it. We're always immersed in some research, and I'd love to share a little more on Gen Z or some of the other workplace research that we're doing. I appreciate the opportunity. You guys are doing a great job with the future of work.
Thank you. Brilliant. Take care.